A building inspector in rural Mississippi drove out to a piece of land behind a tree line because a neighbor had filed a complaint. He expected to find a code violation, maybe a squatter, maybe a junk pile. What he found instead was a steel shipping container with curtains in the windows, solar panels angled toward the sun, and a locking steel door with a welcome mat. He knocked. A 23-year-old woman opened the door and invited him inside. What he saw made him sit down on a folding chair and say nothing for a full minute. But before you see what was behind that steel door, you need to understand how a young mother ended up building it in the first place. Because this is a story where everyone laughed until nobody was laughing anymore. $314. That is what Tamara earned every week before taxes, working the morning shift at a dollar store in Laurel, Mississippi. After withholdings, she took home roughly $260. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Laurel, in the fall of 2020, averaged $850 a month. That left her about $190 per month for food, transportation, diapers, medicine, and every other cost that comes with keeping herself and her 4-year-old son alive. The math did not work. It had never worked. And when her landlord raised the rent by $75 that October, the math stopped pretending entirely. She was evicted on November 12th. The shelter in Laurel had a wait list of 11 weeks. The nearest shelter with open beds was in Hattiesburg, 30 miles away, which would have meant losing the dollar store job and the $260 a week that was barely keeping them fed. A motel room at $49 a night would consume her entire paycheck in 5 days. So Tamara did what people do when every conventional option has been eliminated. She started sleeping in a 2006 Chevy Malibu in the parking lot of a church off Highway 15, with her son buckled into his car seat in the back, wrapped in every blanket she owned. That car became their home through the coldest part of a Mississippi winter. She kept working. She kept feeding her son first. And she started saving money by eating one meal a day. Because she had a plan that nobody around her understood. She was going to buy a steel box and turn it into a house. This is where people laughed. Not behind her back, to her face. A woman at the food pantry told her it was a crazy idea. A man at the gas station said she would cook alive inside a metal box in July. Her own cousin told her to stop wasting time and apply for public housing like everyone else. But Tamara had been doing something nobody expected during those weeks in the Malibu. While her son slept in the back seat, she spent her mornings at the Laurel Public Library researching 3 specific things. First, government surplus auctions where damaged shipping containers sell for a fraction of retail price. Second, county zoning codes that exempt structures under 200 square feet from building permits when they are not connected to municipal water or sewer. And third, how to insulate a metal box so it does not kill you in summer or winter. She found her container at a surplus yard outside Gulfport, Mississippi. A standard 20-foot container in good condition sells for $1,500 to $3,000. But containers with dented panels and warped door frames get pulled from service and sold for almost nothing because no commercial buyer wants them. Tamara found one with 2 dented side panels and a misaligned door. It was priced at $250. The dents were cosmetic. The steel frame was solid. The floor was marine-grade plywood. She paid cash from the money she had saved by starving herself for 3 months. But getting a 20-foot steel box from Gulfport to Laurel, roughly 100 miles north, was a transport problem she could not solve with money, because she did not have any. A flatbed transport would have cost $400 minimum, so she went to church on Sunday and asked. A man who drove a logging flatbed agreed to haul the container on his day off. She paid him $40 in gas money and promised a home-cooked meal when the project was finished. That container arrived on a patch of red Mississippi clay on a Saturday morning in May 2021. The neighbors who could see it from the road shook their heads. They saw exactly what it looked like: a rusty steel box sitting in a field. But what it would become was something else entirely. And the first thing she needed was land to put it on. This is the part of the story that surprises people who have never spent time in rural Mississippi. Tamara did not squat on public property. She did not hide a container behind a gas station. She knocked on doors along the county roads outside Laurel until she found what she was looking for. An elderly man owned 7 acres of land that had been untouched for over a decade. Brush had overtaken the property. The county had sent him notices about the condition of the lot. He could not physically maintain it, and his children lived out of state. Tamara offered a trade. She would clear the brush, mow the road frontage, maintain the land, and check on his house during the winter. In exchange, he would let her place the container on the back 2 acres, out of sight from the road, with access to his outdoor water spigot and a single electrical outlet on the side of his barn. He agreed with a handshake. No lease, no contract, just 2 people who each had something the other needed. Now came the part everyone said she could not do: turning a sealed metal box into a place where a mother and a child could actually live. A shipping container without windows or ventilation becomes a steel oven in Mississippi. Interior temperatures can exceed 140 degrees in July. In winter, the walls radiate cold inward and create condensation that drips from every surface and breeds mold within months. Tamara needed to cut openings in solid corrugated steel, and she did not own a single power tool. She borrowed an angle grinder from a man at her church who did auto bodywork, along with 3 cutting discs and a pair of welding gloves. She marked 2 window openings with chalk and blue painter's tape, measured twice with a borrowed tape measure, and started cutting. The angle grinder threw sparks across the red clay as she carved 24 by 36-inch openings into the steel walls. She wore safety glasses from the dollar store where she worked and stuffed cotton balls in her ears because she could not afford proper hearing protection. The work took an entire Saturday. The door opening required widening the existing container frame by 8 inches on one side to accept a standard exterior door she found at the Habitat for Humanity Restore in Hattiesburg for $20. But the windows and door were the easy part. Insulation was the problem that would make or break everything. Spray foam, the ideal product for metal structures, costs between $1 and $2 per square foot when professionally installed. For a 20-foot container, that would run over $1,000. Tamara did not have $1,000. She barely had $20. So she went back to the same network that pointed her towards surplus auctions and asked a question that changed everything. Do insulation contractors throw away leftover product? The answer was yes. A single residential attic job generates 3 to 5 partially used cans of spray foam that get tossed because contractors cannot resell opened product. Tamara visited 3 insulation contractors in the Laurel area and asked if she could have their discarded cans. The first one turned her away, but the second and third said yes. Over 4 weeks, she collected enough partial cans to FOAM the entire ceiling and upper walls of the container. The lower walls she insulated with rigid foam board panels pulled from a renovation dumpster at a construction site on the south side of town. She cut the panels with a utility knife, glued them to the steel with construction adhesive, then covered everything with pallet wood planking for a finished interior surface. But insulation alone would not save her. Metal structures sweat when warm, moist air contacts cold steel. Without a solution, mold would destroy the interior within a year. This is the problem that kills most amateur container conversions, and Tamara solved it for $18. She bought a roll of 6mm plastic sheeting from a hardware store, the same material used under concrete slabs, and stapled it to the interior framing before installing the foam board and pallet wood. That created an air gap between the plastic and the steel that prevents moisture from ever reaching the metal. 4 years later, there is zero mold inside her container. That $18 vapor barrier outlasted everything else. If stories like this matter to you, subscribing helps more people find this video. And if you know someone in a tough situation who could use a practical blueprint for getting back on their feet, there is a free resource called the Veteran's Blueprint linked in the description below. It is worth bookmarking even if you do not need it today. Now, remember that building inspector sitting in silence on a folding chair? This is what he was looking at. Water comes from the sky. Tamara installed aluminum gutter sections along both long sides of the container roof, angling them toward the rear corners where two 55-gallon food-grade plastic drums sit on cinder block platforms. The drums came free from a catfish processing plant outside Laurel that was discarding them. A mesh screen over each drum opening filters leaves and debris. Mississippi gets 56 inches of rainfall per year. That is more than enough water for 2 people when supplemented by the property owner's outdoor spigot. She purifies the collected rainwater with unscented bleach, 8 drops per gallon, and lets it sit for 30 minutes. Annual purification cost runs about $5. But she still had no electricity, and without it, the container would be dark by 6 p.m. every night. Solar installation companies in southern Mississippi replace panels regularly due to storm damage and warranty upgrades. Panels with cracked glass or reduced output get pulled from rooftops and stacked behind warehouses waiting for disposal. A panel at 60% efficiency is worthless to a company guaranteeing full output. But 60% of a 300-watt panel still produces 180 watts. That is enough for lights, a phone charger, and a fan. Tamara collected 4 damaged panels from 2 solar companies in the Hattiesburg area. Both gave them away free because disposing of them actually costs money. She mounted the panels on a wooden frame angled south on the container roof. The battery bank was 2 used car batteries, purchased for $15 each from an auto salvage yard. A charge controller cost $35, ordered online and shipped to the Laurel post office. She learned the wiring from a YouTube series on off-grid solar that she watched over and over at the public library, drawing diagrams on notebook paper and carrying them back to the build site. The system powers 4 LED light strips, a USB charging station, a small 12-volt fan, and a radio. It cannot run an air conditioner or a refrigerator, but it provides lights after dark, keeps devices charged, and runs the fan that makes Mississippi summer nights tolerable inside an insulated steel box. Cooking runs on a 2-burner propane camp stove she mounted on a plywood counter against the front wall. A 20-pound propane tank lasts roughly 6 weeks of regular cooking. She refills it at a gas station for $15. Annual cooking fuel cost comes to about $130. The total build cost, including the container, transport fuel, all materials, hardware, the charge controller, propane, and every miscellaneous purchase across 5 months of work, came to $412. Tamara had $250 for the container from savings. The remaining $162 came from her dollar store paychecks during the construction period. $412 for a home. And this is what was behind that steel door that made the building inspector go quiet. The front third of the container is the kitchen and living area. The propane stove sits on the plywood counter with a small shelf above for spices and canned goods. A pallet wood table she built herself sits against the wall with 2 folding chairs donated by the church. Everything is clean, everything is organized. The middle section has Tamara's sleeping area on one side, separated by a curtain made from a bedsheet, and storage shelving built from scrap lumber on the other. Every item has a place, but the rear third is what got to the inspector. That is her son's space. He has a platform bed built from stacked pallets with a foam mattress given to them by a woman from the food pantry. His drawings are taped to the pallet wood walls. Some of them are pictures of the container itself, with the solar panels on the roof and the rain barrels at the corners. He has a small desk made from a piece of plywood on 2 cinder blocks, where he does his homework every night under an LED strip powered by the sun. The inspector looked at that homework desk with the solar-powered light and the crayon drawings on the walls, and realized he was standing inside something that technically should not exist. A home that cost $412, built by a young woman with borrowed tools and materials that everyone else threw away, that had survived 4 Mississippi summers and 4 Mississippi winters without a single mortgage payment, rent check, or code violation. That was 4 years ago. Tamara has since upgraded the door to a steel security door salvaged from a demolished office building. She added a small covered porch using corrugated roofing panels and pressure-treated posts she found at a construction dumpster. She built a raised garden bed from cinder blocks where she grows tomatoes, collard greens, and peppers from May through October. Her son, now 8 years old, helps tend the garden and can name every tool in the small collection hanging on hooks inside the container door. The elderly landowner comes by most weekends. What started as a handshake arrangement has become something closer to family. Tamara still clears his land, checks on his house, and drives him to medical appointments in Hattiesburg when his children cannot make the trip. She no longer works at the dollar store. She moved to a warehouse position that pays $13 an hour. The money that used to go to rent now goes to food, savings, her son's school supplies, and a fund she started for a permanent structure she plans to build on the same property once she saves enough for a concrete foundation. But here's the part of this story that reaches beyond one woman in Mississippi. Tamara is not alone. The techniques she used, some learned from others, some figured out through trial and error, match methods that have appeared in at least 25 documented container and micro-shelter builds across rural Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana since 2020. A social worker in Hinds County, Mississippi, described encountering 3 separate families living in converted containers on private land with informal agreements. Each family had discovered the same surplus auction pipeline, the same insulation sourcing method, and the same zoning research to stay beneath permit thresholds. None of them had ever met each other. The knowledge travels the way survival knowledge has always traveled in the rural South. Through food pantry lines in small towns where someone whispers about a woman who built a house from a shipping container. Through Wednesday night church dinners where a man sketches a wiring diagram on a napkin for a stranger. Through shelter waiting rooms where someone shares what they learned at a free health clinic in Meridian, passed along from somebody else at a Salvation Army meal in Mobile. This works in rural areas for reasons that do not transfer to cities. Available land with willing owners, relaxed enforcement of building codes, access to agricultural and industrial waste streams that produce free building materials, communities where neighbors are more inclined to help than to report. In urban areas, every one of those conditions reverses, which is why this quiet movement is concentrated in the rural Deep South and almost invisible to anyone watching from a city. The question people always ask is whether this represents a housing solution or a failure of the housing system. Tamara does not think about it in those terms. She thinks about what was available and what she did with it. Nobody should have to build their own shelter from a damaged steel box in a field. But the fact that someone can, and that the result is a dry, insulated, powered, livable home that has outlasted 4 Mississippi winters and summers, says something about what is possible when every conventional option disappears and stubbornness takes over. Her son does not remember the Chevy Malibu. He does not remember sleeping in a car seat, wrapped in blankets, in a church parking lot off Highway 15. His earliest clear memories are of a home with steel walls, LED lights that run on sunshine, rain drumming on a metal roof above his bed, and a mother who built the whole thing with borrowed tools and materials that everyone else threw away. If resourcefulness like this matters to you, subscribing helps more people find this video. And the video on screen right now documents a completely different off-grid survival build, with methods every bit as creative as these. Click it and keep going. And keep